It's the lust for control. It's the government knows best attitude. I mean, the stories that Dr. Paul tells, the stories that Daniel Hannan tells, the stories that you and I hear about every day, who in their right mind would want the American public to have to endure that as opposed to what we have now? If you have a stone, you could have that thing out of it by dinner time.
Look, they're clueless. And, you know, it's no accident that medical costs are spiraling out of control. I mean, the same reason that education costs are spiraling out of control, because the government is involved. But if you just take a look at something very simple, take a look at one aspect of medicine, cosmetic surgery, right? Something where the government is not involved, where you just go to the doctor and write a check and pay for it. Look at breast augmentation, liposuction, hair transplants. Compare the price today to the price 10 or 20 years ago. The prices are the same or lower. They're not going up. And look what about eye LASIK surgery? I mean, look how it's better now. It's less expensive. So just by its own nature, there is no tendency of medical costs to rise 10 or 20% a year. It's only because of all the government inherent in the system, the overutilization of insurance, which is a direct result of government subsidies for buying insurance, and because of all the government involvement. You know, if we had a free market in medical care would be better. It would be more affordable, and the quality would be even higher. And so if we want to solve our medical problems, we got to get government out and get the market in.
How did we get to the position where people on both sides of the aisle, Republicans as well as Democrats, refer to health care as a right? To me, it's not a right, it's a good, like a wristwatch or an iPod or a cheeseburger, and there ought to be competition for it, and there ought to be places where you can go where you can get a Kobe beef cheeseburger or a McDonald's cheeseburger, but you can't get that with health care.
You have the right to pursue happiness. You don't have the right to happiness.
There you go.
You don't have a right to food, a car, a house, any of those things. Do you want them, and do we have a humanitarian obligation to help our fellow man? Yes. But it's not a right. It's not something you have a tangible right to, because if you have a right to health care, you have a right to my labor, but also not my labor only, the nurse's labor, the janitor's labor, the administrator's labor, the investor's labor, everybody who's contributing to that health care. Do you have a right to take their labor without their permission? So no, you don't have a right, but we confuse this, and so many confuse their own personal ideals of humanitarianism with what a government should do in a right.
Sure, and of course,
hang on one second, Peter. We are chatting with Peter Schiff from Euro Pacific Capital and from Dr. Rand Paul, an ophthalmologist in Kentucky, son of Dr. Ron Paul, who will be on the Neil Cavuto show on the Fox News Channel at 4 p.m. Eastern with maybe some kind of interesting announcement today. Are there profit-making healthcare entities with investors who actually get a return on investment? Do those things still exist in the U.S. today?
Well, they must. You know, it's interesting when I have arguments with people and they say, look, you know, the problem with healthcare is the profits, that the insurance companies want to make a profit, the doctors want to make a profit. Well, since when is pursuit of profit a problem?
Right.
I mean, the reason that, you know, we have goods available is because the people who produce them want to do it at a profit. It's seeking out a profit that keeps quality up and costs down. I mean, profit isn't screwing up the healthcare system. And, you know, when people talk about healthcare, they have a different attitude. They try to say, well, everybody has to have equal healthcare. It shouldn't be the rich have better healthcare than the poor. Well, the reality is the rich have better everything than the poor. They eat better food than the poor. They wear nicer clothes than the poor. They're going to have better health care. I mean, they're rich. But the reality is, in a free market system, everybody will have good health care. Everybody won't have equal health care, just like everyone in America doesn't eat the same food. But people aren't starving. And I think if we have a free market that delivers health care to people, that even the poorest among us will still have adequate or good health care. Will they have the same health care as a Rockefeller? No, because they can't afford it. But if we try to bring everybody to the same level, we're going to lower the level for everybody, and we'll all have rotten health care.
But the thing we're missing, and what we have to admit, is that the current system, the status quo, isn't very good either. We do have a semblance of capitalism. We have private ownership by physicians. I can make a profit.
Right.
But we don't have one key element of capitalism, and that is freely fluctuating prices. Prices don't fluctuate. For example, half of what I do is government, so the prices are fixed.
Right.
If you come to me for eye surgery and you're 65, I charge the same rate as everyone in the whole country. But even the 40% of what I do that is health insurance, that's private insurance, if you're on Blue Cross and you're on Blue Cross, every doctor in the whole country or within my region charges the same price. We need freely fluctuating prices, which means higher deductibles, but then have prices fluctuate. For example, and this is hard for people to believe, but if you made the Medicare deductible $2,000, but then allowed prices to fluctuate, If Medicare pays me $140 for a complete exam, it may be that through competition it's $90 within a year because it works when the consumer can choose his service according to price.
Right now, after that deductible, there's no competition.
There's none. And the deductible's $100, so people get to it on their first office visit. So no patient in America chooses their doctor on price.
What are the burning issues in Kentucky today? Let's just say, hypothetically, you decided to get involved in Kentucky politics. There's a retiring U.S. Senator who's a Hall of Fame pitcher and a sometimes conservative, sometimes big government Republican. The other senator from Kentucky is the minority leader in the Senate. The state could be red state, blue state, depending upon any given moment.
The biggest issue that I have and that I present as I go around the state of Kentucky is I've been to 20 counties so far, and I ask Republican primary voters, because I'm a Republican, I say, would you have voted for the bank bailout? I have yet to meet one Republican primary voter who says he's for the bailout, he or she is for the bailout. And yet, I follow that up with, I say, 50% of your Republican leadership voted for the bank bailout. So what a primary is about is choosing new leadership. And I think the grassroots Republican doesn't connect with the leadership, and the leadership's not representing the grassroots Republican. So I tell them right out. I tell them also, I say, look, we got to the middle of the presidential campaign. McCain suspended his campaign, rushed back to Washington, but he voted the same way as President Obama for basically socialization of the bank.
And what was the rush?
Does that sound familiar to the state of Connecticut, where the average Republican voter doesn't resonate with the leadership of the Republican Party?
Well, it's very familiar. You know, and then, of course, you know, if you look at the announced candidates who want to, you know, challenge Chris Dodd, and the one guy, the leader, Simmons, who was in the Republican Party, he was a sitting congressman for 4 or 5 terms. You know, yeah, I mean, he would have voted. He would have voted for it had he been reelected. I mean, all his entire voting record suggests that he would have voted for big government and for bailouts. I mean, of course, now he pretends that he's against it, but of course, you know, had he been in the trenches with all the other Republicans, he would have voted the same way.
You wrote an interesting piece on LouRockwell.com last week, in which you suggested that Ben Bernanke does not have any way out of the present situation we're in, any plan to get us out of it. What did you mean by that?
Well, you know, people are talking about his exit strategy from all this inflation. How are we going to put the genie back in the bottle before it does any damage? And my point is he has no exit strategy. His exit strategy is to talk about the exit strategy. It's just like the strong dollar policy. What's the strong dollar policy? Well, we believe in a strong dollar. Well, beyond that, that's it. As the dollar goes down, we talk about how we believe in a strong one. There is no exit strategy. There is no way out. The exit strategy would be we raise interest rates in the recession. As unemployment gets worse, we put interest rates up higher. We withdraw credit. We take away the stimulus. They're not going to do that, but they know they have to pretend that they're willing to do that to try to keep the dollar from completely collapsing. So the whole exit strategy is to pretend there is one and hope that they don't have to actually do it.
And it only works, he's going to be able to pull the money out only if you have inflation and growth in the economy. And my dad asked him a great question about a month ago. He says, what do you do if there's 10 or 15% inflation and 0% growth? Are they going to pull that money back out of the economy with 0%
scenario.
growth? If you have 10% inflation or more and no growth, they'll be petrified to pull that money back out.
And what if there's 10% or 12 or 15% unemployment? What if the unemployment rate is still rising?
Exactly.
We are chatting with Peter Schiff, who's the president of Euro Pacific Capital, and Dr. Rand Paul, an ophthalmologist from Kentucky, the son of Congressman Ron Paul. And we're talking about the general malaise in the economy and the president's proposals for health care. I got to ask you something about your father. He is not afraid to buck the tide. You know that, obviously. Right now, this proposal to audit the Fed, he told me the other day, has over 280 co-sponsors. He expects it to be 300 co-sponsors by Labor Day. And still, the leadership of the House will not permit a vote. Well, how does he cope with that?
Well, the interesting thing is a lot of people don't realize this. You could have 400 co-sponsors and never get a vote. You have to have the leadership do this. And there's something else you can get to force a vote called when they dispose of the bill, that you sign a book in the front that says that you will bring the bill to the floor.
Right.
But most
discharge
discharge petition.
Right.
But most of the Democrats who have co-sponsored it will be afraid to buck their leadership and do the discharge petition. So that's the only other way. If you have 218 sign a discharge petition, you could have it go forward. But I don't know. He's pretty even-keeled, and things don't seem to rattle him, and he just keeps doing the same thing over and over again.
Do you think that Ben Bernanke and President Obama and Tim Geithner ardently hope for widespread inflation so that the